Hello. So this will be the final kind of section of the introduction to addiction. When we continue with addiction, we will then specifically be looking at the content that will be examinable, and we will be following a set of notes that will be appropriate to the particular course. Now, I'm likely to have to decide whether I do that with you in our next session or whether I do some of the research methods. At this stage, I'm thinking of content that we can easily cover, that won't have major impact on you, that it's not taught face to face. But I thought, as a way of ending the Introduction to Addiction course, we can look at quite a simple question. Can media play a part in addictive behavior? And now what I'm not looking for is a yes or no answer. I'm kind of getting you to explore this idea because, especially I'm assuming during this time, you would have had lots of opportunity to watch a series either on Netflix, or you would have streamed them online, or you would have watched things that could genuinely kind of both expand your mind or rot your brain. I'm not quite sure yet what the Tiger King has done to me. So the question lies, can media play a part in addictive behavior? So let's look at this particular topic. So first of all, basing this on research, there's research by this person called Silkinen, and what they are saying is that the term addiction is actually something which has become kind of almost common language, everyday language. I'm sure many of you have had these experiences. You might choose to binge watch a series on Netflix and somebody says, "Oh, you're addicted to that." Or you feel that you understand addictive behavior because you've seen musicians or you've seen films that could potentially influence kind of your ideas about it. Now, all the films that I'm going to use are going to actually appear to be very dated because I'm trying to base it on films that I know well and base them on films that have been written about in literature. So Silkinen refers to a film called Trainspotting and highlights that addictive behavior, like the use of heroin, becomes fascinating. Now, the films that we are going to watch are 18s. I have a copy of all of them in the office. When we get back to school, you're welcome to borrow them from me. However, please do not watch them with younger siblings around. Also, if your parents are perhaps less understanding, please go and talk to them. And I'm happy for them to email me and ask me to verify that these are films that I've kind of referred to. So let's have a look at some of these films. Now, I'm not going to watch all the trailers with you. What I would like you to do is potentially to kind of click the links and to follow them yourselves, or to cut and paste into something. But the first film, Trainspotting, it's quite an amazing film, definitely worth watching, and recently they brought out the 20-year anniversary kind of sequel to this. Okay, now what we have is at least 5 people there, and part of the story is around this main guy here, the Ewan McGregor character, and it was one of the first films of its time that was showing drug use in a way that was potentially quite problematic. Okay, so the scene that I think is very interesting to watch, if you don't get to watch the whole film, is the visit to Mother Superior. Okay, so what we find first of all is that it takes us early into the story. Let's load it. Okay, now if you actually listen to the first bit, we hear that he's on a drug kind of treatment program called methadone, and it's kind of meant to try and help him with the heroin addiction. Now he's also dressed in a suit because he's effectively just come from court, where ultimately his friend has gone to jail and he hasn't. But of course, he is now really wanting to take drugs because he hasn't had drugs for a while.
On a day instead of smack.
Okay.
But it's never enough. And at the moment, it's nowhere near enough. I took all 3 this morning, and now I've got 18 hours to go till my next shot, and a sweat on my back like a layer of frost. I need to visit the Mother Superior for one hit. One fucking hit. To get us over this long, hard day. What's on the menu?
So he's gone to his local drug dealer. Now the reason why you might find a lot of this amusing or you might find it horrifying is, of course, he's going to inject heroin into his veins. Now if you're squeamish, you really need to close your eyes or just listen to it, and because it's going to be quite frightening. But what we find is that it's quite hard hitting. Okay. And in fact, he goes into an overdose. Now, this is quite common with people who have come down from their heroin use. Their bodies aren't used to it, and so they kind of take too much. Now, the reason why I like to show this particular scene is because it does look quite tragic. We see all these different things happening to him. At the end, there's a fantastic kind of image of his parents picking up from the hospital and looking really, really so sad and kind of as if things are quite bad. But we also have, at the same time, is that Ewan McGregor is lucky, so therefore Silkinen uses this as an example of how the film portrays this character who kind of hits the jackpot in many ways. He's able to kick the habit of heroin quite easily. He shares needles. He has unprotected sex. He does all these things that typical heroin users would use, but of course everything turns out okay for him because he's Ewan McGregor. He's the main character in the film, where other people around him, things aren't as fortunate. So even though it may not be positive, there's some really kind of frightful scenes where he's coming off heroin and his friends have a baby and it's not kind of ideal and things like that. We also see that ultimately it's not all negative. Okay, so that's the first film for us to have a look at. So maybe media is influencing us, because maybe out of these 5 characters, we're going to be the Ewan McGregor character. So Gun Sekira says that when they looked at the top high-earning films, it said here that drugs were not really depicted in films. It says the portrayal of drugs was used in a positive way. Now this is quite important because what it's showing us is that drugs aren't necessarily negative. Okay. Silkinen adds to this and takes kind of 3 other films that show us, and what he says here, that the films contrast the enjoyment of drugs over the dullness of life. In other words, when you are on the drugs, your life is exciting. Now, the film that I find really interesting is American Beauty. Now, obviously, it's controversial because one of the main characters is Kevin Spacey. Now, I haven't got a clip for you to watch, but you're welcome to have a look at it. But if you really kind of explore the Kevin Spacey character, we see him in the beginning, this pathetic character who's masturbating in the shower as his life falls apart. He then meets his next door neighbour, smokes a joint with him, and he then kind of goes back to his teenagehood and kind of he self-improvement, and kind of he gets his company to kind of pay him for a year while he does absolutely nothing and things like that. So a classic example here of lots of other themes in the film that perhaps distract from this idea that It's this character that starts smoking cannabis that makes his normal dull life kind of go away. That's really important. Now, what is perhaps a little bit more kind of comedic, perhaps, is the Human Traffic film. Now, many of you probably have never heard of this film. I think it's a great film and definitely worth watching. Okay, so when we click on this particular link, we see that ultimately we're going to have a couple of characters who are pretty much planning to spend their weekend having the biggest party on the planet. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward just a little bit, and we see that these...
Brother! Fuck off! Come on!
The weekend has landed. All that exists now is clubs, drugs, pubs and parties. I've got 48 hours off from the world, man. I'm gonna blow steam out of my head like a screaming kettle. I'm gonna talk cod shit to strangers all night. I'm gonna lose the plot on the dance floor. The free radicals inside me are freaking, man. Tonight I'm Jip Travolta. I'm Peter Popper. I'm going to Never Neverland with my chosen family, man. We're gonna get more spaced out than Neil Armstrong ever did. Anything could happen tonight, you know? This could be the best night of my life. I've got 73 quid in my back burner. I'm gonna wax the lot, man. The Milky Bars are on me! Yeah! Calling all the crusaders of the dance floor in green light mode. Disco queens, club casualties. Come on, let's join forces. Let's hoof it!
So that's quite a long kind of intro to that. What we see quite literally is that he is getting ready for the weekend, and we have a number of characters there who pretty much their everyday lives are terrible in terms of the jobs they don't like. They are kind of such circumstances they don't want to be in. But as soon as they start kind of taking the drugs, they have a great time and they resolve issues and things like that. It's a really, really good film, worth watching, kind of really interesting kind of slant on a lot of things. That's called Human Traffic. So once again, we see it kind of supports this idea that maybe we are getting the message that, look, you know, taking drugs is fun rather than our normal dull lives. But that's not the whole picture. I don't want you to kind of be watching these clips and think, you know what I really need to do is to explore this a little bit further. There's also contrasting evidence. The main person who contrasts this is a person called Boyd. Now, what I really quite like about this is it says that with these films, it says here, it does represent the negative consequences, things like physical deterioration. Many of these films, or the more hard-hitting films, you see how as the character kind of repeatedly kind of takes drugs or gets more into the drug use, that their bodies change, that they get sick, that they, you know, don't look good. There's often the sexual degradation, you know, often things like, you know, prostituting themselves or the moral decline. There's often violence in these types of films. What we do know is that the US filmmakers are provided kind of with incentives to kind of not show drug use in a positive way, and that's often why films that do are often kind of in America rated R, or are kind of seen as being hard-hitting kind of art films. Now, I've got two examples for you. I genuinely recommend watching both of these. One of them is an absolute brilliant film with Nicolas Cage in it and Elizabeth Shue, called Leaving Las Vegas. Now, right from the start, there's nothing positive about this. This person is drunk. He's been fired, and literally the premise of the story is that he's going to Las Vegas to drink himself to death. There's no Pretty Woman situation where he meets somebody and everything kind of works out fine, because when he does meet the prostitute, and that's Elizabeth Shue, she's like, no, this is my life, nothing's going to change me, things like that. So absolutely hard-hitting, kind of two broken people kind of meeting and kind of dealing with kind of their problems and their traumas and things like that, but really does show kind of alcoholism and kind of the tragedy that is associated with that. I definitely would recommend watching Leaving Las Vegas. Now, the next one certainly is a film definitely worth watching. You might be familiar with Jared Leto as a musician, but he's an absolute brilliant actor in this particular film. It's called Requiem for a Dream. What I'd probably do is try and use some kind of software to watch this with a friend, because at the end of the day, it's going to be really, really quite tough. Okay, so let's play the clip.
Why you have to make such a big deal? Why you gotta make me feel so guilty, Ma?
Now, right from the start, we perhaps should have suspected that things are not going to be perfect. The main character here is actually stealing his mother's TV in order to kind of make some kind of deal kind of happen, and it kind of doesn't get much better than that. But what we do find is that he is this young, beautiful man, and he is in a relationship with this beautiful woman.
I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. The needle tears a hole.
So I warned you about that.
The old
The main thing here is that we have the two characters who are in love. They're beautiful, young, and we have their best friend. And what we find in this particular story is that things kind of don't get better. We find that as they progress into their drug use, it's kind of a kind of a simple story where they choose to kind of buy kind of these drugs, and then they try them out, and they make a lot of money, but then they start using a bit more, and kind of things go pear-shaped from there. The main thing that I'd recommend in terms of watching this is that, you know, there's no easy fix. They keep on doing things to kind of make themselves kind of move on to the next station, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and ultimately ends up in the two boys basically being stopped, okay, and in prison. And what we find is that he's got a massive infection in his arm, and the boy, his friend, kind of, we know that something bad's going to happen to him. What is interesting about this particular film is that it's not just about young people in addiction. We also have his mother, and she goes on to kind of also have her own addiction. So I'm trying to fast forward to a bit where it's appropriate. Now she's obsessed with this particular film, and she takes some dieting kind of pills, and as it turns out, the dieting pills are probably something like methamphetamines, and things don't go quite right, and she ends up in a mental hospital having ECG and ECT, I should say, and it's really quite hard hitting. And the film does end kind of with this sort of a cliffhanger. We don't actually know kind of where everyone's going. The character that for me really kind of sums it up in terms of the physical deterioration, in terms of kind of moral decline, is this beautiful young girl who ultimately ends up kind of prostituting herself and kind of just lying on a sofa clutching kind of a big watch of cash, you know, and it's all bad. I can't say anything positive about it. It's a beautiful film, definitely worth watching, but kind of hard hitting, and tells you kind of a sad tale. So what we have here is that there are filmmakers out there who are choosing to show us the realities of drug use, but maybe we're getting kind of the wrong message. Now, of course, what I want you to also kind of think about this is that what do the films kind of help us think? If you think of things like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it might give you some kind of understanding of mental kind of hospitals and things like that. We find that films help kind of feed into our society, kind of what our ideas are. Okay, determining our ideas. We also find that we can't deny the effects of media. So, for example, I found this research quite interesting. It said here that 75% of young adults said that they had some strong attachment to a celebrity. Okay, but that's not the important thing. It's the 60% here, or 59% here, who said that their thoughts and attitudes were changed by that particular celebrity. So, of course, if we have celebrities and kind of people that we are seeing regularly kind of doing things like taking drugs or kind of acting in a particular way, it does influence us. But we've known this for a long time. Back in 1984, they were looking at the effects of celebrities, and Ross did some research with some children and basically found out that when a celebrity endorsed a product, people expected, or the children expected, that they were experts. So therefore, if we see an actor who appears to have a drug problem and yet is okay, we believe that, well, they must know more about drugs than somebody else, and so therefore it can be okay. Now, I have gone through this quite quickly. I would recommend that there's probably quite a lot of films. We gave you a list of films and books and things like that to read when we went into lockdown. Maybe go back on that, have a look and see if there's anything there that you would like to watch. But ultimately, I hope that you've had some good experience at listening to me talk about this. Maybe you'll watch those video clips that I've given to you, and then you will also be able to have some kind of opinion about what type of influences that there are on you. That is it for now, and I hope to see you soon, if not speak to you soon.